If you're interested in finding lawnmowers or other stuff to fix and sell to make extra money, now's a great time to do it. And even if you're not ready to fix them now, you can certainly hold on to them until you are ready. But don't be surprised by the condition you find the stuff to be in when you do pick them up. And as you're about to see with this one, sometimes you get more than you bargained for. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this newer style snapper lawnmower. And the problem is that I just picked it up and don't know what kind of condition it's in. However, by the way it looks, there is no way it's going to start on its own. Now the first thing I'm going to do is record all the stickers that I can find. This information will be helpful if we need to replace any of the parts on the mower or the engine. And hopefully we won't need to do that, but there's always that chance. Once we have all the information we need, we'll then check on the condition of the mower, and I hate to say this, but it's kind of rough. It also looks like someone just recently took off the air filter and its cover. And the reason why is because it's much too clean in this area. However, we can't say the same thing about the condition of the mowing deck and the blade. We'll get a better look at it here once we confirm the condition of the engine. At least the fuel tank still has some gasoline in it, but more importantly, we need to check on the oil and its level. And as expected, the oil is much too dark, which isn't great, but is there enough of it? Now that we know the oil is full, we can try and start the engine, but I think you know how this is going to go. So just as we thought, it didn't even try and start. However, if you saw the shorts video on this mower, you'll know that it does run when primed with fuel. Just make sure that the engine tries to start and run before moving on and putting time and money into the project. Next, we'll take off that blade and see just how bad it is, and well, it's pretty bad. So as you just saw, it is out of balance, and not to mention the blade is showing signs of severe wear. There's quite a bit of metal missing from the ends of the blade, which means we'll need to replace it eventually. Now because of the condition the rest of the mower is in, I'd like to give this engine a decent cleaning. So it's not just out of vanity, it's also to ensure that the cooling fins are clean of dirt and debris. But of course, while I have the sprayer out, I might as well clean the dirt and grime from the rest of the mower as well. Now this part is out of vanity, but it's for a good reason, and that is I want to make it look as nice as possible so I can sell it. So it is up to you if you decide to go this far with it, but it doesn't hurt it either. Now there is one place that you should at least check, and that is under the cover for the self-propel. And what you're looking for is dirt and grass that's collected there, which if left untouched could rust out. And it's a good thing that we took off that cover because the belt for the self-propel has come loose from the pulley on the transmission side. I'm not sure how this happened, but in the meantime, I'll just work the belt back onto the pulley. Now this type of cleaning does not need to happen all that often, so it's up to you to decide how often you want to do it. So because it's going to take a couple of days for the new blade to come in the mail, I'll just balance the old one and install it so we can test run the engine. Also, out of curiosity, I want to inspect the flywheel key. Now the reason why is because of the condition of the blade. I want to check and make sure that the key is not sheared, but what we find is really interesting. So the flywheel key is not sheared, however it is slightly off from where it should be. And yes, I could reposition it, but this tiny amount shouldn't hurt it. Also, with the cover off the engine, it'll make it a lot easier to rotate it for the next part. So this part is often overlooked, but it's more important than you think. What I'm talking about is inspecting the valve clearances, which could affect how the engine runs and even starts. Taking out the spark plug allows us to rotate the engine without having to fight against the compression. And with the valve cover off the engine, we'll then rotate it until one of the arms is all the way down and the one we want to check is all the way up and loose. We'll then take our 5/1000ths of an inch feeler gauge and see how it fits in the clearance between the valve and the arm. We want the feeler gauge to just barely fit in the clearance, however it turns out to be much too loose. That means we will need to adjust it, but out of curiosity, we are just going to keep checking it to find out what the clearance has grown to, and what we find out is pretty incredible. It turns out the clearance is 7 times what it should be, which has to be some sort of record in my book. Now to adjust it, we'll need to loosen the jam bolt while holding on to the adjusting nut. We'll then put that 5/1000ths feeler gauge back into the clearance and tighten the nut until the feeler almost gets stuck in it. Once the clearance has been set, we'll then tighten the jam bolt, rotate the engine until the other arm is loose, and do the same procedure there. So I have been asked to explain a little bit more about the clearance and why it's so important. Well, the short answer is timing. If the clearance is too big, it could cause the valve to open just a bit later than it should. And if that clearance is too small, then the valve could open sooner than it should, causing the engine not to run at its best. Now these clearances could also be affected by the temperature of the engine, so it could act one way when it's cold but a different way when the engine is hot. That's why sometimes your mower will start fine when it's cold, but after using it for a while, it takes several pulls to start it back up. So why do the clearances get out of tolerance? Well, my best guess would be wear and tear or carbon buildup on the valve. Before we install the spark plug, I do want to check the air gap on the ground. So I like to set my air gap to 25 thousandths of an inch, but you're welcome to set yours to a different value. Now originally, the gap was a little bit smaller than the feeler gauge, so I did have to pry it open slightly. So I already greased the wheels earlier off camera. However, while I have the cover off, now would be a good time to lubricate the bushings. So these are often overlooked, and that's because they're hidden by the cover. Now you don't need to do this often, just once in a while. So is one type of lubricant better than another one? It sure is, but I just put whatever you have on hand. There's really no need to go out of your way just to find the best kind. Next, we're going to want to drain out as much of the gasoline from the fuel tank to see its condition. If the gasoline is old and stale, then it might explain why the engine didn't want to start. However, after looking at its color and smelling it, it's not stale, but there is a surprise. So what you're looking at is not only debris, but also a tiny amount of water in the fuel. And if we find some water in the fuel tank, there must be some in the carb as well. Now we could drain the fuel from the carb as well, but there is a way to get around this problem. And that solution is to physically prime the carb with fuel and force it to start even with water in the carb. Now that the engine is nice and hot, let's see how it starts back up. So it did take 2 pulls to start it back up, and because it took multiple pulls to start it when it was cold, we're definitely going to need to look at the carb. More than likely, there's going to be water and debris in the carb that's causing this issue. Yes, we could be happy that it even starts and runs, but we want it to start without having to prime it though. At least we know the self-propel works. However, with bald tires and front-wheel drive, we're going to have some traction issues. But I do think I have a no-cost solution to that problem, but we'll have to wait until the next time. So my question is, if your mower wasn't starting, would you ever consider priming it with fuel to coax it back to life? Or would you just take it to the repair shop instead? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.